All right, now on a final note on Wednesday's panel, a man and a woman were kicked off at Air New Zealand flight yesterday for reportedly refusing to pay attention to safety briefing stuff reports. Now, according to passengers on the plane, the flight attendant asked them to watch what was happening as they were in an exit row, but the pair ignored them instead of looking at their phones. We're told the police were waiting for them. The woman apparently pulled out her phone and loudly tried to make a booking with Jetstar. The police say the passenger will receive an infringement notice for using her phone. The passengers told staff it was shockingly arrogant behaviour and the pair looked wealthy, quote unquote. So a lot to unpack here, but what do you think? What do you think of this story, Fetty?
Oh my gosh. Brings back memory. I was only in the plane yesterday, but listen, you're in the exit row. Do as you're told, will you?
Yeah, look, it is. It is. You know, we all want to get out as well, and that's what the exit row's for.
They kicked me out of the exit row every time I asked for an extender belt.
Oh.
I said, could I have an extender? They go, oh, sorry, sir, you can't sit in the exit row.
No.
But I've already paid my extra $20. What the hell?
Look, I mean, the point is it was shockingly arrogant.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care whether they're rich or poor or what they are. You know, I mean, the richest and perhaps the most well-brought-up people in the world are, in fact, you know, quite humble and quite respectful.
But the safety videos are terrible.
That is not the point.
It's part of the point, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Yes,
The point is that you're in an exit row and you need to watch it. That is not the point. Whether it's good or bad is a different...
They're frequent travellers and they're bored by it.
Yeah.
Well, oh dear, how sad.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, we could have a long discussion about whether the videos are good or bad, but that is not the point. Now, have we got time? Can I tell you my very own completely arrogant story?
In 30 seconds,
in 30 seconds.
Yes.
Okay, so parked outside school in Epsom, my little Hyundai. I'm backed up against something that I can't reverse on. I come back out and I am wedged in so that I can't move by the world's most expensive car. I had an appointment to go to. I sit there absolutely fuming. And when the driver came out, I got out, pulled myself up to my full 5'0" and said, "How dare you assume your time is more important than mine?"
Oh.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it was. And that's sort of leading us back round to Air New Zealand, which is their time. You know, they don't have time to watch that. They're far too important.
They had Louis Vuitton too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Louis
you know,
Vuitton.
really?
Yeah.
You
Privilege.
know, actually,
privilege.
brand is not necessarily cool anymore all the time.
So the point is, Fede, that they should, whoever they are, just be respectful.
Yeah.
Be respectful.
And get over yourself, frankly.
It's their rule. It's their way. It's their rules in the plane. Go and fly in New Zealand.
Yeah. Or
go to the Koru Club.
You know, walk.
What do you think of the air safety videos, though, Fede?
The which?
The air safety videos. Could they be a bit simpler? Just the plain message, you know?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, obviously, you know, I don't really watch it all, but, you know, I just...
There you go.
Yes, you do, Fede.
There you go. Admission from Fede. You're saying two things, mate. Hone your message before you come on the panel, right?
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Okay. Fede Taito and Cindy Midgener on the panel. Good to have you both on. Checkpoint next, and I'm back tomorrow with Sue Bradford and Stephen Franks. Should be a good one.
Thanks.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the heat's on the climate change debate. The government says it's delivering landmark action on the issue. Others say its proposed legislation is toothless, all bark and no bite. The banks cut interest rates after the Reserve Bank takes out the slasher for the first time in more than 2 years. We send reporter Nita Blake-Person to one of the country's lowest immunisation zones. Should we segregate unvaccinated kids at school? Another National MP gets the boot from the House. Nick Smith is suspended for bad behaviour, so what did he do? And we hear from a man who says he can't sell his house because a nearby gun club is shooting up a storm.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. Banks have reacted swiftly to the Reserve Bank cutting the official cash rate for the first time in more than 2 years. Within minutes of the OCR being cut from 1.75% to 1.5% this afternoon, ANZ and Kiwibank announced cuts to their mortgage lending rates. However, the Reserve Bank's Governor Adrian Orr says the OCR cut is not as good for savers as it is for borrowers.
I think there's always two sides to an interest rate. There's the savers and the borrowers, and yes, it's lower than otherwise interest rates, and they may need to be thinking about what things other than just deposits in a bank they could be doing with their capital.
Both ANZ and Kiwibank have also lowered the interest rate offered on savings. The Reserve Bank says it has cut the official rate to give the economy a boost in the face of growing risks. Greenpeace says the government's new climate change legislation is toothless because while it establishes a climate commission, it gives the commission no power to enforce reduction targets. Legislation tabled today sets a target of zero carbon by 2050 and phased targets for methane reduction, which is treated separately. Greenpeace's Executive Director Russell Norman says an obvious model has not been followed.
When they set up to control inflation using the Reserve Bank, they didn't give it zero powers because they were serious about inflation. So the Reserve Bank has the ability to push up interest rates and has various other regulatory abilities in order to control inflation and financial stability, whereas the Climate Commission under this bill has no power whatsoever.
Russell Norman says there's also nothing to bind future governments to the targets. The Housing Minister Phil Twyford is refusing to guarantee the government will stick to its 100,000 house Kiwi build target. Phil Twyford is facing ongoing pressure about the number of houses being built under the government's flagship program and the process under which developers are given the Crown underwrite. A paper outlining a recalibration of the program will go to Cabinet after the budget in an effort to improve Kiwi build. Earlier this year, Mr Twyford was forced to drop annual targets, but at the time he said the plan was still to build the 100,000 homes. At Parliament today, he was asked whether that's still the case.
I'm not going to be speculating today on the results of the reset. We'll work through We'll work through the issues, and as we are right now, and we'll be making an announcement in June.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford. The Education Ministry has confirmed that schools cannot bar unimmunised children unless they are instructed to do so by health authorities. It says they can only prevent children from attending if they are believed to have a communicable disease. The Northland DHB has asked schools to consider excluding unimmunised children because of an outbreak of measles in the area. The ministry says the Northland Medical Officer of Health has not asked any school to close or exclude students. The lawyer for a woman jailed over the death of her baby grandson says her client is deeply remorseful. In the High Court in Hamilton today, 54-year-old Donna Parangi of Ruatoki was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison for the manslaughter of 8-month-old Isaiah Neal in November 2015. Parangi and the child's parents were inside her home smoking synthetic cannabis while he was left asleep in a car on a very hot day. Susan Gray told the court that Parangi has not touched synthetic cannabis since.
This case is very sad. Sad because Isaiah lost his life, sad because he was much loved and cherished, and nobody wanted or intended for this to happen. The defendant deeply regrets smoking synthetic cannabis.
Susan Gray says Parangi has made real changes in her life and wants to be there for the rest of her whānau. A second video showing students at a Southland school assaulting others is circulating on social media. Last week, 2 boys from Aurora College were arrested after a similar video appeared online. Today, another video, which appears to show one of the boys and the previous one, has come to light. In it, a boy can be seen punching and kicking a defenceless boy who tells his attacker he won't fight him. A Southland mother who knows the victim says the assault happened on the school grounds last term and the victim was told to keep it quiet.
He was pulled into the office that day. He was told to be quiet about it and that he's to remember that he's a new student and that there's no point in making a fuss.
The woman says the young victim, who was expelled from his previous school, feels the school and other authorities have let him down. It's 5:05. Newly signed halfback Cody Nikorima has been put through his paces at Warriors training this week ahead of their NRL clash against the St George Illawarra Dragons on Saturday. The Warriors are looking to break a four-game losing streak, and coach Stephen Kearney says they've wasted no time in fast-tracking Nikorima with the aim of getting back into the winner's circle.
Just been up-speeding him on our process and what we want from him. Stace and Toddy have been doing a good job with him there and coordinating things with Greenie and Rog. He adds a bit to the team just with regards to the speed that he comes onto the ball with and pressure that he puts on the defensive line. That's our expectation.
Stephen Kearney. The New Zealand Cricket 11 are currently chasing down Australia's score of 277 in the second one-dayer in Brisbane. Steve Smith finished the home side's innings not out on 89. A short time ago, New Zealand was 76 for 1 after 15 overs. Liverpool have produced one of the greatest comebacks in European Champions League football history to beat Barcelona 4-0 at Anfield, overturning a 3-goal first leg deficit and advancing to the final 4-3 on aggregate. Midfielder Georgie Wijnaldum says the team felt they could do it.
No one expected that this will happen. We as a team had the confidence that it could happen. The manager was full of confidence.
It's only the third time in the Champions League that a side has overcome a 3-0 semi-final deficit. That's the news.
Parliament contemplates cannabis.
I don't particularly recall the experience. No, I'm not trying to be funny about that.
I can't remember so long ago.
Folau's future in rugby effectively over.
He lost Rugby Australia the moment he put that post up.
And a major measles outbreak in Northland.
It's real easy for a minister sitting on his chuck at Wellington to make comments like that. I suggest he gets off his chuck and comes and sees what we're dealing with up here.
Get off your chuff with Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, Australia's economic dependence on China and its potential impacts. And after 10, Auckland historical fiction writer Rosetta Allen on her fascinating novel about the Soviet Koreans who were expelled from Russia before World War II. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Central High Country and Gisborne. Partly cloudy and isolated light showers. Hawke's Bay to Wairarapa, fine apart from scattered rain in Wairarapa tomorrow night. For Taranaki through to Wellington, mostly fine with high cloud today, rain spreading from the west tomorrow evening and night. Nelson and Bulla, cloudy with a few showers turning to rain tomorrow, some heavy falls with possible thunderstorms from the afternoon. Westland, rain with some heavy falls from tonight. A few thunderstorms are possible from tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, occasional showers mainly about the fjords. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud with a few spots of rain. Chatham Islands, often cloudy with morning drizzle. It's 8 minutes past 5. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Long-serving National MP Nick Smith has been named in Parliament for the third time in his career. That's one of the most severe punishments a Speaker can hand out. Dr Smith has been suspended for 1 day, which means he's barred from having his vote cast, from sitting on a select committee, from even entering the debating chamber. Now, the situation came to a head after the mother of a young man killed by a drugged driver stood and yelled at the Police Minister, Stuart Nash, from the public gallery. Our political reporter Joe Moyer was there and watched it all unfold.
National MP Nick Smith's suspension came after he questioned the Police Minister Stuart Nash about whether Cabinet had approved a discussion paper on enabling police to do roadside drug testing, given he had told TVNZ that last year. Mr Nash didn't answer the question. The Speaker ordered him to have another go. When Mr Nash got back to his feet, Karen Dow, the mother of Matthew Dow, who was killed by a drug driver on New Year's Eve, stood up from the public gallery and addressed Mr Nash.
I am that child's mother and I witnessed Mr Nash say that on national television.
Mr Nash said he couldn't recall saying that to the media, prompting Dr Smith to ask the Minister whether he would apologise to Mrs Dow for misleading her. The Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters raised a point of order, saying this wasn't the way for Parliament to behave. In the middle of that, National MP Michael Woodhouse interjected, which promptly saw him kicked out. Mr Mallard then tried to get things back in order.
This is a very serious matter. It involves the death of a loved one. I think many of us are concerned at the approach that is being taken in the House now, but in my opinion it is a matter of, at the moment, of judgment of good taste.
Dr Smith then asked to table a member's bill on roadside drug testing, which the Speaker declined. That sparked Dr Smith to ask if the Speaker was opposed to helping people, and when Mr Mallard attempted to respond, Dr Smith cut him off. With that, the Speaker asked him to leave the House. Then Dr Smith shot back.
Soft on drugs like the government.
The Speaker told him to come back so he could punish him further.
The question now is that Nick Smith be suspended from the service of the House. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. No. The ayes have it. The party vote will be held.
And with the coalition parties all voting in favour, Dr Smith was suspended. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
And Nick Smith is on the line now. Mr Smith, was your behaviour grossly disorderly?
No, it wasn't. It was focusing on an issue that's particularly important for my electorate in Nelson after this horrific accident on New Year's Eve. But it's also important for New Zealand when you've got the government liberalising access to drugs and we now have more people dying on our roads from drug-impaired driving than from drink driving, where the Speaker was way out of line, and I've been in Parliament for 29 years, is that any member can seek leave of the House for introducing a bill ahead of the normal process. It's normal for the Speaker to put that leave to the House. For the Speaker to inject himself into the process and for him to object to that bill being able to be introduced is way out of line. It's him getting into the political process in the debate rather than being the referee, and that's why I took objection and said I've got a job to do to stand up for my constituents, and indeed, in my view, he's reacting to where the government does have a soft spot, and that is around its soft approach on drugs.
Are you saying that the Speaker, Mr Mallard, is biased?
I'm saying it was totally inappropriate for him to object to my bill being introduced when the long-standing practice is that is for the House to decide, not the Speaker. If the Speaker's going to start making policy decisions on whether a bill should be introduced to enable police to drug test drivers, if he's going to inject himself into the policy debate, then he leaves himself open to criticism.
While you say that it wasn't grossly disorderly conduct, well, the majority of the House voted that it was to boot you out. So your kind of colleagues and peers think you did cross the line.
Oh, I think that's being a bit cute in the sense that the coalition government members, Labour, the Labour, New Zealand First and Greens, were the ones that voted for my suspension. The real issue here is this. When this petition was launched, the Minister of Police publicly said, clearly recorded by Television New Zealand, that Cabinet had approved a discussion paper on the introduction of roadside drug testing. We now know that was false. Why is
so hang on a minute, Mr Smith. Are you saying that Mr Nash lied today in the House?
No. He made a public statement when the petition was launched on this issue on New Year's Eve, saying that Cabinet had approved the discussion document.
Yes, but today in the House he said he didn't recall making that statement, was what he said.
That's correct, and now we know that statement is false. We do know that Cabinet never approved such a discussion document. Isn't the real issue that we have a Minister of Police being untruthful about decisions that are being made in Cabinet on an issue that kills a New Zealander on average once every 5 days?
I don't think people will debate the importance of the issue you raised. I suppose the question is whether you conducted yourself appropriately in the way that you raised it. That's the third time you've been booted out in your career, isn't it? So doesn't that suggest that sometimes you might misjudge the line?
I'm not in Parliament to eat my lunch. I'm there to do a job. And when I've got constituents, look, Matthew Dow would have been 25 today. He lost his life because a pea and cannabis-fueled driver, being absolutely reckless on the wrong side of the road, killed that young man. That happens in New Zealand once every 5 days. Now, if you want me to go off to Parliament and to allow the Speaker to block a proper debate and a bill being introduced on that important issue, well, that's not me. I'm there to do a job, and I will challenge whether it be the Speaker, whether it be the Police Minister, whether it be the government, on issues where I feel strongly that the government is doing things that are wrong and things that are going to cost New Zealanders' lives.
Mr Smith, haven't you just kneecapped yourself, though? Because in practical terms, you can't do your job now. You're suspended for 24 hours. So what does that mean? You're on the bench, aren't you?
Oh, no, quite the opposite. I suspect that there will be far more focus on the issue I feel passionate about, that is, getting drug testing introduced, as is in Canada, as is in the UK and Australia, as a consequence of
Don't you have an important
Speaker.
select committee tomorrow? You can't vote, you can't transfer your vote, you can't even go into the chamber, you can't be involved in any of the stuff, really.
I can't undo what the Speaker has done. But what I say to New Zealanders is when a Member of Parliament advocating for an issue that's both important and relevant to their constituency gets kicked out of Parliament for a day, and there's no reprimand at all for a police minister who doesn't tell the truth, do we really have the sort of parliamentary democracy that we want for our country?
I'll give you one more chance, Mr Smith. Are you saying, given that example that you've just outlined in the way two different people were treated, is Trevor Mallard a neutral referee, or is he biased?
No, he's not. He's not. He should never have objected to the introduction of the bill. He should have maintained the parliamentary practice that when an MP such as myself seeks leave for a bill to be introduced, to put it to the House and for the House to decide, and when the Speaker starts engaging a debate about the issues and not being the referee, he leaves himself open to the very criticism that undermines respect for his office and, more importantly, respect for our Parliament.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Nick Smith, who has been suspended from the House, and, well, really, he's on the bench for the next 24 hours. Banks have been cutting mortgage rates after the Reserve Bank reduced its key interest rate today for the first time in more than 2 years. The central bank cut its official cash rate to a new record low of 1.5% amid growing economic risk. It's good news for borrowers, but those with savings in the bank have less to smile about. Kim Savage has more on what it means.
The official cash rate is just one of the tools the Reserve Bank has up its sleeve to tinker with the economy. It's aimed to keep what consumers pay for goods on track and to maintain employment at its maximum level. Concerned we're off course a bit because of a slowdown in domestic and global growth, the Reserve Bank's cut its benchmark interest rate in the hope it'll free up a little money for the economy. The central bank's governor, Adrian Orr, acknowledges the flow-on effects of the cut.
So I think there's always two sides to an interest rate. There's the savers and the borrowers, and yes, it's lower than otherwise interest rates, and they may need to be thinking about what things other than just deposits in a bank they could be doing with their capital.
Today's decision from the Reserve Bank was the most closely watched in 2 years. Economists were split on whether the central bank would cut the rate or not. Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr says the winners are those who have debt.
But the losers, unfortunately, are the savers, and a lot of them are retirees. So they'll receive less income off what's already low interest rates. So that's a concern for a proportion of our society.
It's also the first decision by the bank's new 7-member committee. Previously, it was down to the governor and his colleagues to make the call. Mr Orr says members of the group were concerned that a cut could heat up the housing market, but that wasn't enough to put them off.
We do expect to see the impulse from lower interest rates to come through spending and through investment activity, and part of that would be housing activity.
The Reserve Bank signalled a lower track for the official cash rate, but the chief executive of Squirrel Mortgage Brokers, John Bolton, doesn't expect banks to move much further.
I think you're going to see a bigger disconnect between the OCR and mortgage rates if it falls further, because the reality is that banks can't drop their deposit rates too much more. You'd be lucky if you got 0.5% on a savings account these days, and term deposit rates are okay, but they're certainly getting pretty low now, aren't they?
And some economists are now picking there'll be a further official cash rate cut as early as August. For Checkpoint, this is Kim Savage.
And it's 19 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. Let us know what you think about any of the stories you've heard on the programme tonight. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Prime Minister has described climate change as New Zealand's nuclear-free moment, but does the plan unveiled today live up to the rhetoric? After intense negotiations between Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First, the government has settled on a split gas approach to reduce emissions. New legislation will set a target for a 10% reduction in biological methane emissions by 2030, so that's agricultural emissions, and it's aiming for a provisional reduction of between 24% and 47% by 2050. It will also set a new reduction target for all other greenhouse gases of net zero by 2050, in line with New Zealand's commitments under the Paris Agreement, and establish an independent climate commission. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Prime Minister says the climate change legislation sets out the government's plan for the next 30 years and will give certainty to New Zealand industries. Jacinda Ardern says it's world-leading.
The government is today delivering landmark action on climate change, the biggest challenge facing the international community and indeed New Zealand.
The big debate is around how much onus should be put on agriculture, such a major contributor to New Zealand's economy, but with valid questions about environmental sustainability. The Climate Change Minister says the government has tried to balance the need for action against the impact on industry. James Shaw says there is collective responsibility for reducing emissions.
It is patently unfair for those of us who live in cities to ask the farmers who we depend on for our food to go through a steeper transition if we choose to continue to drive around in fossil-fuelled cars when we could be switching to cleaner options.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges says his party agreed with the net zero carbon target and the Climate Commission, but believes the methane reduction targets are too high, which will lead to farmers having to get rid of stock.
There's no doubt it will involve culling and significant culling.
New Zealand First pushed hard to have a 10-year transition period in which methane emissions have to be reduced by 10% to allow time for methane-reducing technology to come to market. Its leader and Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters says the government will help push that along.
With our help, which is serious financial backing to the on-the-farm operation and the research level that we will put into it, they'll meet those targets easily and they'll be guaranteed not to face unfair competition abroad because we haven't met our climate change targets.
But Andrew Hoggard from Federated Farmers says the legislation shows the government is willing to abandon pastoral farming.
It's going to have a massive impact. If we take it out to the 47% reduction range, and none of these bits of science come along to enable us to achieve that, that is effectively going to be nearly a 50% decrease in agricultural production.
Winston Peters says that's an irresponsible response.
Sometimes, the stuff at the back of the cows can get into your ears and contaminate your thinking. But the great mass majority of responsible farming men and women are going to see this as something that has saved their future.
Another strong criticism has come from the Executive Director of Greenpeace, Russell Norman, who says there's nothing in the legislation that makes these targets legally binding.
So there's kind of a bit of a gap between the bark that comes out of the bill and what bite it has to actually make this stuff happen.
The bill itself doesn't set out an enforcement regime for individual industries. That level of detail will be contained in emissions reduction plans to be created subsequently by ministers. James Shaw was asked what powers the government will have if industries resist meeting the targets laid out in the law.
The emissions trading scheme is essentially the incentive to shift, because if you've got the opportunity to shift and you don't, ultimately you're facing a price that should give you a good incentive to move to a lower carbon alternative.
But Russell Norman questions how that would work with agriculture when biological emissions are not included in the ETS.
So this is a subsidy that costs the taxpayers about $1 billion a year via the ETS to subsidise the greenhouse pollution out of the agricultural sector. Thus far, there's no indication from this government that they intend to remove that $1 billion a year subsidies to pollution.
The initial signs from both the government and the National Party were that both would work in a bipartisan manner. And while there have been constructive discussions, today Mr Shaw apologised to National, saying the consultation and negotiations could have been handled better in the latter stages. Mr Bridges says his caucus will discuss whether it will support the bill at its first reading, although the government doesn't need that support to pass the law. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
The principal of a Northland school with up to 250 unimmunised students says he knows of at least 6 families who will not let their children be vaccinated because they don't believe in it. In the last 2 weeks, Northland has had 2 confirmed cases of measles, which is highly contagious and can prove fatal. With the region having some of the lowest immunisation rates in the country, that's left health officials scrambling to ensure it doesn't spread, and principals are being encouraged to exclude students who haven't had their jabs. But schools say it's just not practical to keep potentially thousands of children out of classrooms, and parents need to get their children immunised immediately to avert a crisis. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Munro have been in Northland today to speaking to one of those principals.
In the playground at Hora Hora School, Principal Pat Newman is doing some simple maths. He reckons he's only seen immunisation certificates for 150 of his 400 students. If the school was forced to exclude or segregate the remaining 250 who aren't vaccinated, that would create a big problem for him.
I mean, you look out there, there's hundreds of kids. Where do you put them? And so, as I keep saying to you, and I keep repeating it, let's hope common sense prevails.
Mr Newman says it's possible some of the 250 students at his school who don't have immunisation certificates have actually had their jabs but have lost the paperwork. But he knows that's not the case for everyone.
We are aware of at least 6 children in the school whose parents firmly are of the belief that it's not right to immunise. There's probably more. Those are 6 we know about.
He's trying to get word out to parents about the urgency and the seriousness of the situation.
The odds are that if you get measles, 1 child in 1,000 will die. That's the figures. The odds on a child dying from being immunised are way, way, way further out from that.
Because if schools are told to exclude or send home students who aren't immunised, he doesn't know how he would manage it.
What happens though if a parent says too bad and just sends a kid to school? Do I put an electric fence around the school? Do we grab those kids as they come in and put a star on their arm or something to say you're not vaccinated and you're vaccinated?
Northland DHB yesterday sent this letter to principals right across the region. It says Northland is experiencing its lowest immunisation rates for many years and has some of the lowest rates across New Zealand. The anti-immunisation lobby and the impact of social media, anti-science and the Vaxxed movie, which was shown across Northland last year, have had a significant impact, it says. It also notes that immunisation is critical for the health of children and the wider community, and rates need to increase to improve safety. Parents we spoke to outside Hora Hora School weren't too worried about the low immunisation rates.
My daughter is having her children immunised, even though she is reluctant to. On balance, she gets them immunised.
Your kids are immunised?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
So they don't catch any bugs.
Would you prefer if kids who weren't immunised were kept away from your children?
I would just suggest for their parents to get them done.
Do you think children who aren't immunised should be excluded from the classroom or kept away from the ones who are?
I don't think so. No. Because once you are immunised, I think it's protected from, so.
Makes it harder to keep it contained when there's kids that aren't immunised, but that's a parent's choice.
Pat Newman has sent a list of the students at his school who do not have immunisation certificates to the Northland DHB to be cross-referenced with their records. No one from the DHB was available for interview today, but Mr Newman says he'll be wanting more immediate action from it if this measles outbreak is to be stopped in its tracks. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says children shouldn't miss out on school just because their parents are what he calls pro-plague or anti-vaxxers. He's putting the onus back on the Northland DHB to step up and ensure the region has sufficient immunisation levels. In Whangarei for Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person, Aho.
And you can see Nita and Nick's piece there up online. We'll put it on our Facebook page as well. High-tech security cameras are to be installed at the gates of the Al Noor Mosque next month following the Christchurch terror attacks. The cameras, designed by Texas security company Athena Security and donated by Qatar trading company Al Amira, promise to automatically detect any active shooters and alert authorities within seconds. But some experts say the tech raises concerns over privacy and practicality. Katie Todd has more.
The security cameras are a form of artificial intelligence, or AI, never used in New Zealand before. Athena Security say they can detect anyone visibly carrying weapons and provide a live video alert to authorities within seconds, even before shots are fired. After extensive testing with video footage and SWAT teams, CEO Lisa Falzone is confident that the cameras work in 99% of cases.
It's a solution that can happen now. You don't have to wait for legislature changes. It's happening, happening all over the world, at least once a week. And this is something people can put in now to protect themselves.
1 year after Athena Security commercially launched the security cameras, about 50 organisations, mostly in the US, are using them. Ms Falzone says no active shooters have tried getting past the cameras yet, but simply having them installed is a deterrent.
It's used in schools, it's used in businesses, it's used in large companies, Fortune 500, basically anywhere where people are concerned about safety and want to make their cameras a proactive and interactive tool rather than just a reactive tool that just records crime.
Sean Ryan is a researcher who holds a PhD in artificial intelligence. He says the cameras may be able to provide the kind of eagle-eyed accuracy that no humans could achieve, but warns that we can't solely rely on AI for security. Dr. Ryan says similar security companies tend to store footage on servers so they can keep upgrading their technology, raising the question of who has access and what privacy safeguards are in place. And he says other AI security initiatives in New Zealand, like facial recognition cameras in supermarkets, have shown that there is always a margin of error.
The technology is never perfect, so they'll have a decision to make about exactly how sensitive they want to make it. Do they want to be able to capture any image of a gun and set off the alarm, in which case they'll have some false positives, or do they want to dial it down a little bit, reduce the number of false positives and potentially have some guns that won't be detected?
New Zealand Army Major Abdul Latif Smith has been working with the police to assess security at mosques around the country. He welcomes anything that could better protect worshippers, but says since March 15 there are already a lot of security measures in place to provide authorities with an early warning.
I'm thinking that it's also got to be linked up to the police so that early warning can be provided immediately. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good your technology is if you can't warn the appropriate agencies to get to a location in time to react.
President of the Muslim Association of Canterbury, Shagaf Khan, says when the technology is first installed, it will just be used by mosque management. Nevertheless, he says the Al Noor Mosque community is welcoming the technology.
The community is very, very happy to have any sort of security measures that, as much as we can add on to the mosque, because the incident is, is still unforgettable, and it's just difficult for the people to forget. So any sort of addition to the security, to the mosque, I think it will just give bit of peace of mind and security as well, practically.
The cameras are expected to be installed shortly after Ramadan at the start of next month. Until then, armed police remain at the gates of mosques around the country. In Christchurch, for Checkpoint, Katie Todd.
Up on Checkpoint on RNZ National is the government's proposed climate change legislation, all bark and no bite. A grandmother is sentenced for her part in the death of a baby who was left in a hot car. And the Gun Club under fire for ignoring a court order to shut up shop. We'd love to hear from you, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101 about anything you've heard on the program today. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you could send us a good old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And here's Susanna with the headlines.
Two banks have lowered mortgage rates on the heels of a cut in the official cash rate, the first in 2 years. The OCR has been cut from 1.75% to 1.5% this afternoon. Governor Adrian Orr says the OCR cut is better for borrowers than for savers who might like to think about other options. Greenpeace has called the government's new climate change legislation toothless. Its executive director Russell Norman says it establishes a climate commission but gives the commission no power to enforce reduction targets. He says the Reserve Bank, with its power to raise and lower interest rates, is an obvious model. The Housing Minister Phil Twyford is refusing to guarantee the government will stick to its KiwiBuild target of 100,000 houses. Mr Twyford is under ongoing pressure over the target and has been forced to drop annual targets. He says the government will make an announcement in June after working through the issues. The Education Ministry says schools cannot bar unimmunised children unless health authorities instruct them to do so. They can prevent children from attending only if they are believed to have a communicable disease. The Northland DHB has asked schools to consider excluding unimmunised children because of an outbreak of measles in the area. The ministry says the Northland Medical Officer of Health has not asked any school to close or exclude students. The lawyer for a woman jailed over the death of her baby grandsons says her client is deeply remorseful and has not touched synthetic cannabis since. In the High Court in Hamilton today, 54-year-old Donna Parangi of Ruatoki was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison for the manslaughter of 8-month-old Isaiah Neal in November 2015. Parangi and the child's parents were inside her home smoking synthetic cannabis while he was asleep in an overheated car. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen, and Madison Reedy has joined us for business. Really only one big story in town today for business, isn't there?
There is. Anything else is a waste of time today.
Okay, so Reserve Bank cutting the OCR, the official cash rate. How has the market reacted?
So I should also add that we've had another bank, BNZ, has joined the club of ANZ and Kiwibank, who swiftly changed some of their mortgage home loan rates this afternoon after that official cash rate decision landed at 3 p.m. So we saw that 25 basis point drop from 1.75% to a new record low of 1.5%. So on that news, the New Zealand dollar dropped 0.75 cent from 66 US cents before 2 o'clock to 65.25, and that was when the decision landed. But it's now recovered a little bit, so it's now buying at 65.9 US cents, 93.8 to the Australian, and 50.4 British pence. And the NZX Top 50 index, which isn't affected by this, but I'll give you that too. That closed up almost 0.4%. That's a rise of 37 points to close at 10,063 points.
Interesting. And what else has been going on today that we need to know about?
There was a childcare company called Evolve Education Group that's listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. It's asked its shareholders to help it out financially. So it wants shareholders to buy 4 times more than their current shareholding in its business at a discounted rate of 8 cents per share. Now that's part of its capital raise to raise hopefully $63.5 million. Now it says it needs that money to repay ASB Bank $30 million of debt that it has with it. It's currently in a capital management program with ASB Bank because the bank is not comfortable with its current debt ratios. It also wants to fund its expansion into Australia. It plans to buy at least 12 profitable childcare centres across the Tasman to help boost its earnings, and then the remainder there will cover the cost of the capital raise itself. Now, Evolve has been undergoing a 3-year turnaround strategy in New Zealand. It's been dogged by losing customers, which are children and their parents at its childcare centres, falling occupancy rates at them too, and also a loss of staff, which seems to be an industry problem that's heavily affected them. Its finances are not in good shape. It's flagged with this capital raise announcement today, and the fine detail was the flagging of another goodwill impairment for the full financial year. They're expecting another $75 million to be cut there, and that includes increased support office costs that it's had to pay over that period and having to cover the cost of those declining occupancy rates. So it expects its full year net profit to actually be a loss of $101.8 million. Now, the chairman, Alistair Ryan himself, is actually retiring in June, but he says that he's comfortable post this capital raise with the state of the company.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy with your business news this afternoon. Bark but no bite. That's the verdict of former Green Party co-leader and now head of Greenpeace, Russell Norman, on the government's new zero carbon bill. The proposed legislation has legally binding emission reduction targets, including one for agriculture. But the worst consequence for not meeting them is a court declaration noting the failure. I asked Dr. Norman if this is, as the government has described it, landmark action on climate change.
No, I mean the bill sets some targets, but there's no plans in place to achieve those targets, and of course the targets themselves are entirely unenforceable, so no one can make the government achieve those targets.
Well, let's look at this in a bit more detail. 10% reduction in biological methane, so agricultural emissions in 10 years. How would you rate that as a target?
Well, it's a bit short of the target, but again, I mean, there's a target and then there's actually reducing emissions. So the government has pretty much ruled out every tool to reduce agricultural emissions. So they won't put on a nitrogen tax, they won't ban nitrogen fertiliser, they won't limit stocking rates, they won't limit the dairy herd, they won't make agriculture pay for their emissions, maybe 5% if we're lucky. So the taxpayer has to subsidise those emissions to $1 billion a year. So it's nice, I guess, to have a target. But what I'm interested in is actual policy that will actually reduce emissions, and so far we've seen nothing when it comes to agriculture.
Would you have settled for 10% reduction?
If it was actually a reduction, if there were policies to reduce emissions, that's what I'm interested in. Targets are, they're just pieces of paper at the end of the day.
So I'm just wondering, at what point is something worse than nothing?
Well, at this point, remember, this isn't emission reductions. These are some targets in decades off. There's a climate commission, but it has no power to do anything to make the government achieve the targets. There's special provisions in there that say that you can't go to a court and force the government to achieve the targets. The court can give a declaration that the government isn't achieving its targets, but that declaration has no power. There's a special section there that says anything a government department does, if it's inconsistent with these targets, doesn't invalidate it. So government departments can carry on with doing whatever they like. I mean, when you look at the detail of the Act, I mean, it's very clear that there's no mechanism to enforce it and there's no policy behind it.
So what would you like to see then in terms of a mechanism to enforce it?
Well, I mean, if you take it as seriously as, let's say we thought that climate change was important as inflation, for example. When we look at the Reserve Bank, it has real tools. It can put up interest rates, even when it might be politically unpopular. They can take a long-term view that it's in the best interest to achieve that. I think a minimum deposit for new houses, very unpopular politically, but they said it was important to do it to protect financial stability of the system. So if we thought that climate change was important as inflation or financial stability, then we'd give the Climate Commission real independent powers, for example, to push up the price of emissions under the emissions trading scheme. So we give it actual power to say, well, the government's not achieving the emission reduction goals, so we're going to push up the price of carbon in order to make sure that we achieve them. And we're going to do it independently because we're achieving the long-term goals that the country has set itself in terms of emission reduction, even if that results in increased carbon prices in the short term. If you model it off the Reserve Bank, if you think that climate change is as important as financial stability, and obviously I do, even more so, then you give the Climate Commission real independent power to achieve it.
Well, I mean, you've been a politician, you know the reality of MMP politics. This piece of this proposed legislation, isn't it just the reality of MMP politics? You have to negotiate, you have to get everyone to agree.
I think that's absolutely true, and obviously New Zealand First and National are the reasons, I think, primarily why this isn't stronger. But let's not call it something it's not. I mean, it sets some targets, so it has a bit of bark, but there is literally no bite. You can't enforce the targets. There's no policy to achieve the targets. This government has done some really good things on climate change. For example, stopping new exploration permits for oil. But if you look at agriculture, it hasn't done anything yet. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the policies that actually reduce emissions. And I think it's very important that people don't get misled into thinking the government's doing all this stuff on climate change just by announcing some targets decades into the future with no policy to achieve them. That's not doing stuff on climate change.
So what do you think? What do you think should happen then? Should the Greens have dug their toes in on this or what?
Well, I mean, I think that it's better to, it's better to be straight up front. I mean, if the government isn't introducing policies to achieve emission reductions, then I think we all need to know that, and then people can, become much more active politically, pushing the government in order to get the kind of emission reductions we need. But we shouldn't be kind of distracted by these targets, because the bill is black and white that they are unenforceable. They put it in the legislation. You can't make the government achieve these targets, and there aren't policies to do it. So, we need to focus on the reality, and we need to mobilise to achieve it.
So, do you think the Greens are not being transparent in presenting this as landmark action?
I don't see how it's action at all. It's nice. It's nice to have aspirational, virtuous targets in the future. That's a nice thing. But surely, what's most important is to have actual policy and real emission reductions.
So, are you disappointed with the Greens then? What they've achieved here? Are you disappointed in them?
I'm extremely disappointed in this bill because there's no enforcement. There's no independent power to achieve any of it. So,
and whose fault is that then? Whose fault is it?
Well, I mean, it's obviously I'm not inside the coalition government. They've got to, they'll have to explain to themselves, to the rest of us, why they've come up with such a weak outcome. That's really their mission.
So what do you think is going to happen now? I know in your press release you mentioned the fact that overseas there's been protest and civil disobedience over a lack of action around climate change. What do you think the response is going to be on the streets here?
Well, I mean, I think that peaceful civil disobedience will continue until governments actually take action to reduce emissions. It has been effective. I mean, the reason we have the exploration ban, the ban on new exploration permits, oil and gas, is because of peaceful civil disobedience. That's the only way it happens. So I think that people will continue to put pressure on governments that are being too timid.
What about you? Are you going to be civilly disobedient over this?
Well, I mean, I've already obviously had my days in court over swimming in front of the seismic blasting vessel, but it's not directly about me. I think if we're going to be successful in forcing governments, it's actually going to take thousands of people.
And that was Greenpeace Executive Director Russell Norman. A grandmother jailed for the manslaughter of an 8-month-old has been told that while she's not a bad person, she's someone who has made very bad choices. Isaiah Neal died after being left in a hot car in Ruatoki for 2 hours while his grandmother, mother and father were inside smoking synthetic cannabis in November 2015. 54-year-old Donna Parangi was today sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in jail for the baby boy's death. Our Waikato reporter Andrew McRae was in court.
The Crown and Donna Catherine Parangi place Donna Catherine Parangi before the court.
Donna Parangi was found guilty following a trial in March. It was the second time she'd been in court for Isaiah's death. At an earlier trial, she was convicted by a jury, but that was later overturned on appeal and a retrial ordered. Crown lawyer Hayley Sheridan told the High Court in Hamilton that a sentence starting point of up to 5 years was warranted. She said Parangi played an active role in looking after the boy and was in a position of trust.
The Crown also relies on the vulnerability and defencelessness of the deceased, given his young age, at just over 8 months old. He was entirely dependent on the adults in the household to protect him from harm.
Parangi's lawyer Susan Gray said her client was remorseful and that she deeply regrets the loss of her grandson.
This case is very sad. Sad because Isaiah lost his life, sad because he was much loved and cherished, and nobody wanted or intended for this to happen. The defendant deeply regrets smoking synthetic cannabis.
The defence lawyer went on to say that Parangi had made real changes in her life.
She is deeply remorseful. Shortly after this event, she stopped smoking synthetic cannabis and has not smoked it since.
Susan Gray told the judge that Parangi's life has almost been destroyed because she feels so remorseful.
Her losses as a result of the events of that day are extreme. She has suffered loss in every single aspect of her life, for which she is enduring, and not in a self-pitying way. She is trying to get back on track so that she can be there for other people.
The court heard that a sire was left to sleep in a car in full sun with doors and windows shut. Estimates of the temperature inside the car range from between 40 and 45 degrees. Justice Fitzgerald told the 54-year-old she had led a blameless life until the boy's death.
You are hardworking and until recent times have often been the primary breadwinner for the family. And at least when you have not been under the influence of synthetics, you have stepped in and tried to help your daughter as much as possible with her children. You are not a bad person. You are a good person who has made some very bad choices.
The judge said that while she accepted Parangi was extremely remorseful, she pointed out that she didn't accept her actual role in causing the boy's death.
Given your lack of insight into your actual role in this offending, your continued rejection of the jury's verdict, and suggestion that others are in fact wholly responsible for Isaiah's death, I cannot give you a discreet discount, at least, for remorse.
Isaiah's mother, Lacey Tefetu, and his father, Shane Neal, had earlier both pleaded guilty for their part in his death and were sentenced to jail. 3 years for Tefetu and 10 months for Neal. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
It is about 10 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Pupils at a Sutherland school and their parents are organising a protest next week after a second video circulated on social media today showing assaults that appear to involve children from the school. The video was apparently taken at Aurora College in Invercargill last term, but has come to light today after being posted on the Anonymous Team Facebook page. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight.
The video shows a teenage boy, apparently 14 years old, telling his attacker he won't fight him while backed into a corner and with his hands down. The attacker, also apparently a young teenager, then throws punches and kicks at his defenceless victim. According to a Southland mother who knows the victim, the assault occurred at Aurora College late last term, and despite the incident being raised with the school, nothing was done.
He told me that it was brought forward to the school and the principal, and that pretty much he was pulled into the office that day. He was told to be quiet about it, and that he's to remember that he's a new student and that there's no point in making a fuss.
The woman, who did not want to be identified, says the victim recently started at Aurora College after being expelled from his previous school. But in the video, he appears to be trying his best to de-escalate the situation and not get involved in violence.
I know that his family is going through a lot at the moment, so he doesn't really want to cause any more trouble for them.
The woman says the incident took place on the school's grounds. The release of the video on the Anonymous Team Facebook page follows the circulation last week of a similar video portraying teenagers allegedly attacking Aurora College pupils on a street close to the school. The Southland woman says the attacker involved in the video released today is the same boy featured in last week's video. She says there is something of a fight club culture operating at the school, with the boy from the two videos heavily involved.
It's pretty random. It's not like they target students, they pretty much just randomly pick them, from what several students have told me, and their aim is to get as many hits as they can, like views on social media, and then they become like the kingpin.
She says the teenage victim is angry and feeling let down by authorities, including the school. Neither the school, the Ministry of Education nor the police had responded to Checkpoint's queries about the video and incidents at the school by deadline today. But those responsible for the Facebook page which highlighted it were happy to discuss their reasons for bringing the video to light. In recorded response to our questions, this is what Anonymous Team had to say.
The incidents came to our attention when parents of the victims reached out to us after the New Zealand police and the school involved declined to take action. We have called a protest in response, The victims need a voice and up to this point have not been heard.
The anonymous team group is calling on pupils and parents to don Guy Fawkes masks, similar to those seen in other protests around the world, and protest the school's lack of action next Friday.
It is in hope that taking a day of action will bring attention to the overall failing of the authorities in New Zealand in their duties to protect and care for our children whilst they are at school.
The group says it hopes other schools will join them in taking a stand against bullying. 2 teenagers have been arrested and are facing youth court in relation to the video circulated online last week. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
In response to queries from Checkpoint, the Ministry of Education says it's been in contact with Aurora College and is confident the matter is being managed appropriately by the school's board. The Ministry says it's inappropriate to comment further while the matters are being investigated by the police or before the courts. The police say they aren't aware of the second video, but they are encouraging anyone with information to come forward. Residents of Makaro, north of Auckland, say even more gunfire rings through their tranquil valley now than when the Auckland Shooting Club was ordered to shut down a month ago. One local has been trying to sell his house for 9 months, but says he can't find a buyer because of the club, and his real estate agent says the noise is so bad he doesn't know if he'll ever be able to sell it. Matthew Tunison reports.
It's not allowed to operate as a club because of a Court of Appeal ruling a month ago, and the Auckland Shooting Club's websites say it's closed down. But according to locals spoken to by RNZ, nothing could be further from the truth. One man, who doesn't want to be named because of the intimidation he says he's endured, says last weekend was particularly bad.
It's about 30 cars, we reckon, on Sunday, and then afternoon they just decided to really turn up some heavy rock music at the same time, as well as all the gun shooting and hooting their horns as they were driving down the entrance. So it's actually worse now than when they were actually allowed to operate there.
According to Auckland Council, some recreational shooting is permitted at the property, but only if it falls under the definition of informal recreation. The resident believes the property owner appears to be exploiting this loophole, lock, stock and barrel.
Well, the only knowledge we're aware of is that they can say it's now private land, private use, that he's inviting friends, but I'd be very surprised if he knew 30 gun shooters that are outside of the Auckland Shooting Club membership.
He's trying to sell his house, in part at least, because of the gun club's antics, but it's proving impossible.
But as soon as the enforcement was that the gun club cannot operate, we started seeing more foot traffic come through the door the weekend before and the weekend before that, and people actually said that we've been monitoring your house, but we don't want to live on a road with a gun club, so we've not bothered viewing it until we've heard this news.
His real estate agent, Rick Davis, couldn't believe what he witnessed when he turned up to host an open home in the Tranquil Valley on Sunday.
All of a sudden this music started absolutely blaring out. The music was almost as loud as the shooting. In fact, it was louder. It was sort of AC/DC type of music. It was unbelievably loud. They're taking the piss out of these poor people on that street.
One of the songs was the 80s rock anthem We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. Mr. Davis says it's a very nice area of mostly lifestyle blocks, but the club's foreboding presence means selling a property there is hard.
I can't sell it. I can't. I mean, people are obviously very reluctant to even come and see the place. One minute you hear the gun club's closed, then you hear it's open again. All of these people in their Remuera tractors going up and down that road, so the road's deteriorating, and it's not a very pleasant... Yeah, I just feel sorry for them.
Mr. Davis says a council staff member was there on Sunday and would have also witnessed the day's events. Auckland Council says in a statement several complaints about the property have been received recently, including the firing of pistols. An investigation into whether the activity breached the Auckland Unitary Plan is underway. Meanwhile, police say they're reviewing the decision to grant the club approval to use pistols on the range. Shooting club owner Raymond O'Brien did not respond to RNZ's requests for comment. E tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Matthew Tunison aho.
Prince William has welcomed his brother Harry to the Sleep Deprivation Society the day after the birth of the latest member of the royal family. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have yet to reveal the name of their baby boy, but will apparently front the cameras tomorrow, UK time. The BBC's royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
message from far and wide, congratulations. Relayed at Windsor Castle to the Queen, accompanied today by the Duke of Edinburgh at an official lunch.
Thank you. Congratulations and other great grandchildren.
At a dinner tonight in Berlin, the Prince of Wales, speaking in German, said he was particularly pleased to be there as the grandfather of a new grandson. And from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge in Greenwich.
I'm very pleased and glad to welcome my brother to the Sleep Deprivation Society. It is parenting, but no, I wish him all the best, and I hope the next few days they can settle down and enjoy having a newborn in their family and all the sort of joys that come with that. So, yeah.
Outside Windsor Castle, the stalwarts who love these events were entertaining the tourists and the media. All that was missing, really, was a sight of the Sussexes and their son. That will have to wait. Harry and Meghan remain determined that this is one event over which they want to have control. And that determination to control the message has yielded several, well, oddities. It now appears that baby Sussex was not born at home, as everyone was left to believe, but at this exclusive private hospital in central London. Whether that was Harry and Meghan's plan all along is unclear, but a baby's place of birth has to be recorded on its birth certificate. Now what the Sussexes may feel they need is a lullaby. This is the Kingdom Choir, which sang at their wedding, singing now as Britain welcomes an Anglo-American baby of mixed race as the latest member of its royal family.
And that was Nicholas Witchell reporting from London. Almost news time. We'll be back after 6 o'clock news with more on climate change legislation.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātaua tēnei. Federated Farmers says the government's new climate change legislation sends the message New Zealand is willing to abandon pastoral farming. The agriculture sector has been given till 2030 to reduce biological methane emissions by 10% and till 2050 to reduce them by between 24 and 47%. Spokesperson Andrew Hoggard says the provisions for agriculture are frustratingly cruel.
It's going to have a massive impact. If we take it out to the 47% reduction range, and none of these bits of science come along to enable us to achieve that, that is effectively going to be nearly a 50% decrease in agricultural production.
Andrew Hoggard of Federated Farmers. The Education Ministry has advised schools they cannot bar unimmunised children without direct orders from health authorities. There have been 2 cases of measles in Northland where the District Health Board is trying to prevent an outbreak of the disease. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The DHB has asked schools to consider excluding unimmunised children in order to prevent further cases of measles. But the Education Ministry has told schools that attendance is compulsory for children between the ages of 6 and 16. It says schools cannot prevent a child from attending unless they believe on reasonable grounds that she or he has a communicable disease. However, the Ministry says schools must follow instructions of their local medical officer of health, and Northland's one has not yet asked any schools to close or exclude students. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The National MP Nick Smith says Parliament Speaker Trevor Mallard is not neutral. Mr Smith has been named in Parliament and suspended for a day without pay, one of the severest punishments a Speaker can hand out. After the mother of a young man killed by a drugged driver yelled at the police minister from the public gallery, Dr Smith accused Mr Mallard of being, quote, soft on drugs like the government. He also says the Speaker interfered when he tried to introduce a bill. Dr Smith was asked on Checkpoint if Mr Mallard is a neutral referee.
He's not. He should never have objected to the introduction of the bill. He should have maintained the parliamentary practice that when an MP such as myself seeks leave for a bill to be introduced, to put it to the House and for the House to decide, and when the Speaker starts engaging in a debate about the issues and not being the referee, he leaves himself open to the very criticism that undermines respect for his office.
The National MP, Nick Smith. The head of the Meat Workers Union says justice has prevailed now that a Court of Appeal decision has gone in its favour. The court has agreed that meat workers must be paid for time spent preparing to go to and from rest and meal breaks, which involves strict hygiene processes known as donning and doffing. The union's National Secretary, Graham Cook, says workers have been doing unpaid overtime in order to meet the health and safety requirements. He says it's about time the pay reflected the hygiene and preparation requirements. The union now expects all meat companies to comply with the court decision. The Defence has questioned the way Inland Revenue characterised cash that flowed between the bank accounts of 11 Thai restaurateurs charged with tax fraud. The defendants are facing 64 charges in the High Court in Wellington, including tax fraud and money laundering. Anne-Marie May reports.
In its opening, the Crown said the defendants worked together to evade tax, including by failing to bank cash they received from customers. However, their lawyer Mike Leonard told the court today it had to be satisfied about the amount of cash involved and also that it was not simply money which had been recirculated among the family group as part of a Thai collective savings practice known as SURE. He also questioned whether IRD's method of calculating how much cash the businesses received was sufficiently robust for use in a criminal court. Mr Leonard said the Crown must also prove that each defendant knew of the business and tax conduct of the others. In Wellington, Anne-Marie May.
The jury in the trial of two men accused of raping a woman in a Napier hotel in 2017 has retired to consider its verdict. Joshua Pauling and Jason Trembath are on trial in the Napier District Court. The jury has heard the woman was heavily intoxicated and had no idea she'd been the victim of a sexual assault until 3 months later, when the police showed her an explicit image Mr Trembath had posted on a Facebook page. In closing argument, the Crown said the woman did not give her consent and the photo is evidence she was the object of the men's ridicule. The defence said the woman was capable of giving consent because she remembered events leading up to the incident and text messages the following day indicated she was embarrassed about what had happened. South Africans have begun voting in the country's first general election since 2014. As the BBC's Andrew Harding reports, the governing ANC party, which has been in power for 25 years, faces its stiffest challenge yet.
After a decade of economic stagnation and soaring corruption, opposition parties are threatening the ANC's comfortable majority. President Cyril Ramaphosa insists he can fix the ANC and transform South Africa. Many here are inclined to believe him, but plenty are not. The big cities are starting to slip into the hands of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance. The populist economic freedom fighters are gaining ground too, alarming the white minority and turning South African democracy into a livelier and often angrier space.
Andrew Harding with that report. It's 6:06. To sport, and in cricket, the New Zealand 11 are making a good fist of chasing Australia's score of 277 for 6 in the second one-dayer in Brisbane. Steve Smith top scored for the home side with 89 not out, and Doug Bracewell took 3 wickets. A short time ago, New Zealand were 183 for 2 after 33 of their 50 overs, with Will Young 89 not out. Australia won the first game by 1 wicket. Warriors coach Stephen Kearney says newly signed halfback Cody Nikorima was recruited for his potential, but it may not be realised in Saturday's game against the St George Illawarra Dragons. The Warriors, who sit 12th on the NRL ladder, are looking to avoid 5 straight losses at Suncorp Stadium this weekend, but Kearney says the priority is to ensure Nikorima finds his feet first.
We know what he was capable of. The expectation is not for Cody to come in and fix things. Everyone else needs to make sure that they're executing their job and getting their jobs done first. And I'm sure Cody will be an asset somewhere along the line.
Stephen Kearney. The Mainland Tactics will be looking to back up their Super Sunday win when they face the Northern Mystics in the Netball Premiership tonight. A win or bonus point will lift them to 4th on the ladder. The Central Pulse are leading on 36 points, with the Southern Steel 4 points behind in second. 2 regular matches remain. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a window on the world of Central Europe and the populist regimes finding favour along the route to the old Iron Curtain. The curtain rises on a new Islamic republic in the final episode of our drama, Fall of the Shah, and we speak to Margaret Spanvey, who, until her evacuation from Tehran in 1979, witnessed that Iranian revolution firsthand. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Indira Stewart and First Up are back on air tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. before Corin Dan joins Susie Ferguson on Morning Report from 6. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Central High Country and Gisborne. Partly cloudy and isolated light showers. Hawke's Bay to Wairarapa, fine, apart from scattered rain in Wairarapa tomorrow night. Taranaki through to Wellington, mostly fine weather with high cloud today. Rain spreading from the west tomorrow evening and tomorrow evening. Nelson and Bulla, cloudy with a few showers turning to rain tomorrow. Some heavy falls with possible thunderstorms from the afternoon. Westland, rain with some heavy falls from tonight. A few thunderstorms possible from tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, occasional showers mainly about the fjords. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud with a few spots of rain. Chatham Islands, often cloudy with morning drizzle. It's 9 minutes past 6. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The government's plan for combating climate change is already being condemned as toothless. The proposed legislation sets a new emissions reduction target for greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide to net zero by 2050 and establishes the Independent Climate Commission. It sets a lower target of a 10% reduction for methane emissions by 2030, aiming for cuts of 24% to 47% by 2050. Catherine Hutton reports.
The plan is in line with New Zealand's commitments under the Paris Agreement, but there are questions about how it will be enforced. Courts can't impose legal sanction on those who drag their feet. They can only issue a determination. James Young-Drew from the youth-led climate change group Generation Zero says that needs to change, and he'll be pressing for amendments at Select Committee.
That includes giving the courts the power to impose legal sanctions. The carbon budgets and the targets that we are signing on to absolutely must be legally enforceable.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is downplaying any concerns about compliance, saying it's clear industry is taking its obligations very seriously.
The Commission will be involved in helping us budget across industries. They will be factoring in whether or not the technology exists for us to actually be able to set an expectation that's reasonable of different sectors as well.
Under the bill, methane will be treated differently to other greenhouse gases in response to pushback from the agricultural industry. The Climate Change Minister says the government has tried to balance the need for action against the impact on farmers. James Shaw says there is collective responsibility for reducing emissions.
It is patently unfair for those of us who live in cities to ask the farmers who we depend on for our food to go through a steeper transition if we choose to continue to drive around in fossil-fuelled cars when we could be switching to cleaner options.
The Prime Minister has highlighted the $20 million government investment in agricultural research. Asked if that was enough, Fonterra's Director of Sustainability, Carolyn Mortland, says much more research is required.
There needs to be significant investment in innovation and research. We have jointly partnered with the government and will continue to do so, but we will be looking for continued and significant investment from the government.
The aviation industry is among the worst greenhouse gas emitters. Christchurch Airport's Chief Executive Malcolm Johns says alternative technology will play a key part in improving performance.
There are electric planes in development. They're not commercial yet, and you can't get an electric plane and go to Shanghai or Los Angeles yet. By 2035 to 2040, it's highly likely that we will start to see different technologies come into all parts of transport. What this bill says is that we have to get on and be part of that journey.
It's not clear from today's announcement what the cost to the country will be, but the chair of the Climate Change Iwi Leaders Group, Mike Smith, says it was time other sectors assumed their share.
Māori took a real haircut over our treaty settlements in order to preserve the health of the economy, and we settled for less than 1 cent in the dollar, basically, our historical grievances and the cost of those to the economy. And so I think if we're prepared to do that, we have an expectation that other sectors need to assume their share of the responsibility as well.
The public will have a chance to have their say on the bill when it goes before a select committee next month. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
And Green Party co-leader and Climate Change Minister James Shaw joins us now from Parliament. Minister, 10% reduction in agricultural methane over 10 years. What did you pitch for?
Well, I pitched for the science that gets us to 1.5 degrees of global warming or keeps us within that envelope. I mean, that is the single most important thing, and that's in the purpose of the Act. So
was the 10% reduction what you started negotiations with?
No, if you go back and take a look at the document that we consulted on last year, there were a range of options which included net zero carbon dioxide only, then split gases target, and also net zero all gases.
Sorry, I'm actually asking what you wanted. So as co-leader of the Greens, what would you have liked to see? 10% reduction, is that enough in 10 years, in your view?
Yes, it is, because that's what the science tells us gets us to that temperature goal of staying within 1.5 degrees of global warming. So what I wanted was a bill, the purpose of which was to keep New Zealand within that envelope. And it is one of the first pieces of legislation in the world that codifies that goal of staying within 1.5 degrees in primary legislation.
Because you'll be aware that some interest groups, including Forest and Bird, while they think it's a little bit unambitious, they say that 91% of submitters called for net zero gases as a target for all. So why didn't you listen to them, the submitters?
Well, we did listen to them, but we were also saying, well, what does the science tell us? And we were also looking at what are the kind of economic effects that are distributed across the economy. And essentially where we landed was what is required to keep within that 1.5 degree envelope, and the sort of burden sharing, I guess, across the economy in terms of who needs to do what in order to get us there. Now,
so
you'll notice that on the other side, of course, the agricultural sector are saying that they think that the target that's been put in there is actually too ambitious. So I think that where we've landed does meet the science. That is the most important thing, and it does say, look, we all have a role to play, and we've got a collective responsibility to support those sectors that do face significant change through that transition.
And we'll get to the farmers in a minute, but basically you're saying this was the minimum required to reach that 1.5 degree target. So you could have gone big and bold, couldn't you? You could have done more than the minimum. Why didn't you?
Well, because then we would be doing more than we had to stay within the 1.5 degrees, and it would come at significant cost to particular parts of the economy. So you would be, if you did want to go that far down the route, you would be closing down large sections of the countryside. You would be shutting down rural communities. You would be reducing food production, and frankly, that was a toll that we weren't prepared to take. The Paris Agreement itself says that we have to make this transition without sacrificing food production, because we do have a growing population on planet Earth and they need feeding.
So how are you going to enforce what you have got here?
Well, I mean, the bill has a number of accountability mechanisms in it. I'm familiar with the comments that Dr. Russell Norman made this afternoon about enforceability. The issue is that, let's say that there's a climate change minister in the year 2040, and we miss the emissions budget for the year 2040. Well, that climate change minister can't have done much about that, because the decisions that would lead to missing the budget in 2040 would have been made many years before that minister was in office. So that person can't be held accountable for missing the target. But the person who made the decisions in the first place, some decades previously, can be through the provisions that are in the bill.
Yeah, in what way? Just a slap across the wrist from the courts declaring that you've failed to meet your targets. That's it, isn't it? In terms of comeback?
I mean, that is pretty significant, because what it says to the government is actually, you've got it wrong, you need to go away and do your homework. So, for example, if the Climate Change Commission says, look, here's what your emissions budget needs to be for this period, and the government doesn't listen to that advice, then they can be taken to court for that and have that overturned.
But all the court will do is make a declaration. It can't force you to do anything. It just tells you failed to meet the targets.
No, that's true, and that's because when we were consulting last year, I started with the model that was kind of more akin to, I guess, the Reserve Bank, if you like, where the Commission would have significant independent decision-making power. I have to say the overwhelming feedback that we got from the public was that they wanted to make sure that this was a parliamentary process, and that is because, and certainly in the submissions that I read, people said, look, the distributive impact of this, or the decisions that can be made, are so significant, it really does need to be taken by the House of Representatives.
So let's go back to the farmers then, because they're saying that this is frustratingly cruel, these targets, if indeed the technology that we think is coming that will help them doesn't turn up in time. So what are you going to do to assist them?
Well, there's a range of measures, some of which will be announced later this year. But the key thing that the industry has said would be most useful to them was assistance in putting in place integrated farm plans, because, as they said, farmers actually want to do this. The issue is that most of them don't have the information that they need about what's the situation on their own farm and what their farm what their options are for their farm, given the different conditions around the country. So that's at the top of the list. We've also started, as of last year, extension services to support farmers with additional information and so on. To Caroline Mortlock, her point from Fonterra about increased funding for research and development, she's absolutely right. We've actually doubled our commitment over the next 2 years for research and development, and we will be doing a great deal more in the R&D space.
So the reality is the farmers will get all of this assistance from you, and they still won't have to pull their weight in this, will they? Others are going to be carrying more of the can than farmers are.
It's incorrect to say that they won't be pulling their weight. They absolutely will.
How can you say that?
Well, because all of the advice that I have had says that in order for us to stay within that limit, every sector has to do its part. Agriculture is one of those sectors, and they've got 3 sets of emissions to look after. They've got carbon dioxide, they've got nitrous oxide, and they've got methane, and they've got to work across all 3 of those. There are other sectors that also face significant transitions. I keep quoting the steel mill, who have got to get their emissions down to net zero in 30 years, and currently there is no technology on the horizon that they can substitute. So there is significant innovation and R&D that has to happen in the economy over the course of the next 30 years. Malcolm Johns from Christchurch Airport pointed to that in his comments this afternoon.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That's Green Party co-leader and the Climate Change Minister, James Shaw. Auckland University's Vice-Chancellor has agreed to tackle discrimination on campus, but he's standing by an earlier statement that a growing white supremacist movement is utter nonsense. Today, the university's Students' Association released a 6-page report into bullying, harassment and discrimination on campus. The report found students experience systemic and pervasive hate at the university. It recommends the establishment of a working group to prevent discrimination and affirm a zero tolerance for all forms of discrimination. Now, speaking for the first time on the issue, Stuart McCutcheon says he will implement those changes, but he told our reporter Katie Scotcher he can't guarantee that every student feels safe on campus.
Large numbers of people come here, they're successful, they're happy, they enjoy the experience. But we do have, in any large organisation, situations where some people engage in comments that aren't appropriate, that may be hurtful to others. And we have to encourage people not to do that.
It is more than just a small number of students, though, and you would have read yourself in the report that the Students' Association has backed these students in saying that there is a widespread issue at the university.
Well, I don't know exactly how widespread the issue is. So, yes, we've had a number of students who've commented on things that people have said. Whether that is more widespread than would be experienced in the general population, we simply don't know. The number of actual complaints that come into the university about these issues is quite low. I appreciate, of course, that often these sorts of situations go unreported because people find it difficult to make complaints. But we don't know the extent to which comments of the kind that are being complained about or are causing concern are actually being expressed in the university. And so the fact that a number of students have commented that they have had these things said or heard them said, I don't doubt that that is true. But it's also worth remembering that there are 50,000 people in this organisation, and it is a very large organisation. And even if the incidence of these things is relatively low, in a large organisation they will occur with a frequency that is obviously recognised by people who were part of the hui.
Do you think there are white supremacists on campus?
No, I don't. Well, I can't guarantee anything, of course, but the two cases that led to the discussions about white supremacy, those two cases, there were two students, they were unrelated, in the sense that the two cases weren't related. Both of those led to complaints, and those complaints are being dealt with, have been dealt with. So I don't think that two students out of 42,000 total student body could be described as widespread, and it's not clear to me, I know more about one of the student situations than the others, but it's not clear to me that they were white supremacists at all. Expressing views about other people that those people might find unpleasant or repugnant or disagree with doesn't necessarily make somebody a white supremacist.
That was Auckland University's Vice-Chancellor Stuart McCutcheon talking to our reporter Katie Scotcher. Wallabies fullback Israel Folau could now be sacked from the game of rugby after an independent panel found the Wallabies star committed a high-level breach of his contract when he made controversial social media posts. Last month, Folau posted that homosexuals and those that are living in sin will end up in hell unless you repent. Across the Tasman, the debate on all sides has been fierce, and it's not over yet. The ABC's Rachel Mealy reports.
He's produced some scintillating moments in the sport.
They keep it alive. Folau! Israel Folau! Finishes off for the Wallabies. They hit back.
But Israel Folau's future now looks bleak. The panel's determination means Rugby Australia can now terminate his 4-year, $4 million contract. Former Wallaby Peter Fitzsimons is a journalist for the Sydney Morning Herald. He says this sorry saga may not end here.
The issue now is, will he fight it? You know, they've gone through the legal process as per the contract when there was a dispute. The answer's come down, you've breached the contract. The next step is, does Israel take it higher to, an actual legal court? And so it's a very difficult decision for him because he's a man that's been on $1 million a year, which as far as I understand is about to or has gone to zero. And so the question for him is, do you put your high-powered QCs after a case where the preliminary legal view has been you've got no case, you've breached your contract?
He says another fight will only drag the sport of rugby further through the mud.
We of the rugby community went through this agony for 3 or 4 weeks last year. As we understand it, he promised not to do it again. And so on the promise that he wouldn't do it again, signed a contract for $1 million by 4 years, $4 million, and did it again. I do feel sympathy for him in the sense that, nobody thinks this is a bad man. But you just can't breach your contract and put rugby through that again and still expect to have your job.
Peter Fitzsimons rejects the view put by broadcaster Alan Jones that Israel Folau has a right to express his religious views.
Now, this is a young man who plays football in the daytime and at night time, in his own time, preaches in his church. And he's in trouble for uttering 4 of the most immortal words in civilization's history: I am a Christian. Working in an environment where they preach inclusion, but they seek to exclude Israel. They say they believe in diversity, but they then want uniformity. And so there'll be a punishment handed down. At the end of the day, it is war. Israel will go if he has to go, and he'll be assisted in his funding right to the High Court.
Jason Garrett.
And that's Alan Jones ending that report from Rachel Mealy. A woman has been removed from an Air New Zealand flight for failing to pay attention to the airline's safety briefing. She was on a plane from Wellington to Auckland yesterday when she reportedly refused to comply with requests from the crew. The incident has highlighted the importance of airline safety videos and the way the message is delivered. Michael Kropp reports.
It's Kiwi to rock around, it's safe and fly, it's Kiwi. It's Kiwi. It's Kiwi.
So, this is safety, old school style.
Love them or loathe them, Air New Zealand's safety videos have become increasingly creative over the years. From Rachel Hunter to the All Blacks and Lord of the Rings, the videos are a far cry from the standard drill of decades past.
Hi, everybody. In the next 3 minutes, we're going to work hard, work out, and get you fit to fly. Let's go!
But when a woman on a flight from Wellington to Auckland yesterday reportedly refused to watch the video, she was kicked off the plane. The airline confirming its handling of events in a statement.
NZ424 Wellington to Auckland returned to the gate yesterday after a customer failed to comply with the crew's instructions. Police were waiting at the gate when the aircraft returned and the customer disembarked.
The woman was travelling with a man when the incident occurred. The pair were in an exit row which requires passengers to respond in the event of an emergency. Aviation commentator Irene King says she's appalled at the behaviour because it compromised the safety of others.
To behave disgracefully as they have, is to put all of the passengers and clearly the crew at risk. And that's just simply unacceptable.
The police added the woman received an infringement notice under civil aviation rules relating to the use of a cell phone, which carries a maximum fine of $2,500. Ms. King says the infringement notice was an appropriate course of action. She says accidents like the fatal Aeroflot crash earlier this week highlight the importance of safety briefings and the full attention of passengers, just in case. So if these safety videos are so important, why does Air New Zealand keep making ones that are unbearable for some people to watch?
That's an exceptionally good question, and I have a lot of sympathy for that point of view. My personal view is those particular videos have gone way past their use-by date, and of recent times a number of them have just been, in my view, obnoxious.
Ms. King advocates a return to simpler times. This is Air New Zealand's 1998 safety video for its 747.
Please ensure your mobile phone is turned off at all times.
It's a no-frills approach, and the message is straight to the point.
Remember, your crew are trained to ensure your safety. Please follow their instructions.
Air New Zealand declined an interview about its safety videos, but at Wellington Airport today there was still some support for the airline's more colourful productions.
Well, a lot of the videos are pretty well done.
Entertaining, and it gets your attention.
I like it when the All Blacks are in there.
The last one, the rapping one, was really too frivolous. Don't mean to shame by them, but I do think they distract from the safety message.
A message that clearly needs to be seen, whether you like it or not, before you take to the skies. For Checkpoint, call Michael Kropp their name.
That's all we've got time for this evening. Don't forget to look at all our stories online if you want to see the pictures. Back tomorrow.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
It's pretty obvious that Rugby Australia will now move to tear up his $4 million contract and that Israel Folau won't be able to play rugby.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Not only did they get the goods, get the facts about the atrocities before anyone else did, they also got the perpetrators on record.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
Shut up yourself, you grade 8, just for the randomness of it.